So there is a lot of deep, engaging mathematics to be found in the results of elections in Canada. Now the question is, what is the role of computational thinking and coding with that mathematics? What is the benefit of using coding and mathematics? So I'd just like to go through that now. So I have here a Jupyter document called First Past the Post Ontario Election Teacher Version. So the versions that the students would use is very similar to this, only a lot of the answers are not present. Now I've gone through and I've run some of the cells already in advance to save time. Right here in this particular cell, I've input data, party names, numbers of seats won by party, percent of vote, and put it into a data frame. And when I showed the data frame, I get this. And now this data frame is kind of the centerpiece. It's what we're going to use to isolate data and construct graphs, so that students can actually look and see what proportionality looks like and doesn't look like when it's graphed. Some of these cells that we're going through, I've cleaned up the data a little bit. Here I've changed the indexing from numbers down the side to the party names, more convenient. I've enacted a library called matplotlib to allow us to actually make graphs. In this cell, I've isolated one part of the data, the number of seats, and I've created a smaller data frame. Now, this data frame, called df underscore seats, we've got in this cell, and we're going to plot a bar graph. Now, this code right here, this code cell, is the abstract cell, the abstract code for creating a bar graph. All we need to do is put in the data frame that we want to work on and run the cell and run the cell. There we go, and we get a graph. So this is pretty powerful because we've abstracted the creation of a graph down to its main components in Jupyter Notebook. And because it's automated, we can use this over and over again. We can change the data frame and create any number of bar graphs for election data or other data. So this shows the number of seats by party, and we know this data already. Okay? Now, what I would like the students to do after this is to take what they've learned, the creation of a data frame and the creation of a graph, and use that not to graph number of seats by party, but to graph percent of vote won by each party. And so they have a space where they can do that, but of course the answer is down here. So this code will create the data frame, this time with percent of vote. And this code right here is exactly the same as the one that created the graph above, except we're using the different data frame. We're using df underscore votes, not df underscore seats, and we get a graph that looks different. Now we can compare these graphs and try to see whether the results are proportional or not. Of course, this is difficult to do because they're not close to each other. So when we go down further, the students are asked to run this code where the original data frame, df underscore on 18, that's the original one up here that has number of seats and percent of vote in it. We're going to pop that into the bar graph making code, and helps if I'm in the right cell. And this is what we get. We get a double bar graph. Now, students can take a look at this and maybe with some assistance see that this is not a proportional relationship. In some cases, the percent of vote gave parties higher numbers or high numbers of seats, so the Conservatives and the NDP benefited from the first past the post system. But the Liberals, they got almost 20% of the vote, but look how their number of seats is. It's down here at 7. The Green also has a low number of seats, and the others didn't have any seats at all. So we can see that the results are not proportionate. So the next thing that the students have to do, and they don't have the answers in their document, only the teacher does, the task is create another double bar graph, but this time, instead of using the number of seats they actually won, figure out how many seats they would have won under a proportional representation system. So these cells are almost identical to the ones up top because we've created a general abstract code for these various items, preparing the data and plotting the data. So we'll just enact these. So our libraries are in place. In this case, we're creating a new data frame. Now this data frame, number of seats in PR. These are the number of seats that the parties would have won if the percentage of the vote was the same as the percentage of seats they won. Okay? Now let's take a look at the graph that creates. This is a visual representation of proportionality in the electoral system, in proportional representation. We can see that in every case, the proportion of blue to orange is the same. So this is an image of proportionality. This is an image of lack of proportionality in electoral systems in Canada. Okay, and it's this image, this ability, this computational modeling allows students to create images that can help them solidify their understanding of a very, very important concept. We talked about how important proportionality is in mathematics education today. Some students, if they're only looking at the numbers, may not fully understand what we're talking about, but if they can see the image, if they can take a hand in creating the image, tinker with it, and see, oh, that's what proportionality looks like, and oh, that's what the lack of proportionality looks like, then they have a stronger chance of really internalizing that concept.